In the meantime, the rest of us are fortunate to have Devon Christianson to provide a keynote address. Devon has almost 30 years of experience working in the public sector on grant and system development, program planning, teaching, volunteer management, and implementing aging and disability programs, including providing direct services. She knows of which she speaks. Devon has worked at the Bay Area Agency on Aging, Brown County Human Services Department, UW Green Bay, and the AdRC of Brown County, where she is the current director. In addition, Devon has worked as a rural senior center director, nursing home social worker, and a long-term care hospital link coordinator. She writes, I'm inspired by students with big dreams and big ideas. I also love coffee and opened a coffee house where persons with disabilities are the baristas. If you are in the Green Bay area, please come to our walk-up window at 300 South Adams. I just had to say that. Devon did not make me say that. So Devon, please turn on your camera and microphone, and everybody, please join me in listening to this inspiring talk by Devon Christianson.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So I'm delighted to be here today, and I was not given a huge amount of time, so I'm going to do my best to give you some thoughtful comments about innovation, and just really, I guess I'm here to be some of the entertainment while the judges deliberate. So hoping I can do a little of that too. So next slide. Just very quickly, at the AdRC, Brad gave a nice shameless plug about our coffee house, but we also do many, many other things that today is not the day to go through, but just know we're the central contact point for older people and people with disabilities to help them stay independent in their homes. Next slide. So our values, I wanted to just point out these values as we continue to reflect on them. If you see one of them is to inspire innovation right there. That's one of the values that the AdRC holds. So innovation permeates everything that we do. And even though people might think of us as a human service organization, we really need to engage the world in a different way than simply delivering services. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about what has COVID done. So what it really has done in my head as I'm watching what's happening around the world in this last year is that COVID's been an accelerator. Many of those things that have bubbled to the surface, or maybe innovative products or ideas, were sped up very quickly through innovation. And what's going to happen during this last year, where people had time to sit and think and reflect, is many more innovative ideas have come forward. So we're going to see in this next year, millions of new businesses being created, products launched, and new services transformed, all because of COVID. It's the silver lining. Next slide. So one of the things, according to the Wall Street Journal, I just want to read this quote because I think it's really telling about what do we now know about older persons? What is innovation doing? What has COVID done? And the Wall Street Journal writes that more people will age at home. This has always been an issue for older people and people with disabilities, staying independent. But COVID has only reinforced that in a more serious way. Where most adults say they want to remain, there will be a boom in innovations improving life in later years. And with COVID giving us a reason to reflect on mortality, we will plan how we want to live and die more deliberately. Next slide. So we have big problems. Innovation is inspired by big problems. In my line of work, we call them wicked problems because they are not easily solved. These are social problems that we need innovation to help us with. These problems can be solved with high-tech and low-tech solutions. As you saw from the presentations today, a lovely combination of some things that are higher tech and things that are lower tech. So some of the things that have come to the forefront in this last year are issues of isolation and loneliness, people having access to care, grief and loss, access to food and services, and end-of-life care. These are some of the big problems that have only been highlighted further. Next slide. So what have been some of the responses? What are some of the things? They're iPads. We all know about iPads, right? Well, in this arena, grandpads, they're called, are something that's new on the scene, kind of a high-tech solution to make technology easy. So big buttons, very easy to use, very quickly people can learn to get on it, connect with families. It was a way of reducing isolation and loneliness. There's even some home care agencies that offer this as part of their service, so that when they come in to provide health care, they also give them a grandpad that the older person can use so they can stay connected in more significant ways. Next slide. The ever familiar Alexa, right? We all know about Alexa, but Alexa has come onto the scene in a new way. They have a new product called LifePod, which is really a voice-activated caregiver. Alexa can already be programmed to help you remember phone numbers and take your pills, and even be a companion that you can call and talk to Alexa, and Alexa will talk back. Just ask her anything. But the pod program really is a way of scheduling out somebody's entire day, checking in to see if they're okay, alerting people if the person is not okay or doesn't respond, making sure that people are bathing and dressing and all those sorts of things. So I ask, is Alexa the next man's best friend? Next slide. Speaking of man's best friend, something that has jumped onto the scene are robotic pets. This might look like a really nice, innocent little puppy, but this puppy is robotic, and their logo is no poop, just play. So folks don't have to take the pet outside. There's no vet visits, none of those complexities, no barking unless you ask it to. But these robotic pets are more than just a children's toy. They're very interactive. They have eye contact. They will respond when you speak to them. They're voice activated. They do many different movements. They have cats and dogs, depending on what you're looking for. They have found some really great beneficial uses for persons with dementia that help them keep company. But in the arena of isolation and loneliness, some of the recent studies that are out show that robotic pets are very close to real pets in terms of companionship and support. Next slide. So think about a granny flat, for example. These granny flats have really sprung up on the West Coast. And what is really cool about them is that a person may have been living in their big house. They no longer want to continue to take care of their big house, and they can buy an accessory dwelling. As you can see here, there's a small bridge between it. The older person can move into what we would call a granny flat, and the younger family moves into the front big house where their kids, etc., can live and grow. There's many benefits: intergenerational interaction, caregiving for that older person, keeping them at home longer. They've done a lot of research around making sure that there are not additional tax consequences. And one of the best advantages is once your older person is no longer with you, they're detachable and you can just move them off. Next slide. Access to care. So you just heard a lot about medicine, access to care, people seeing their physicians. You know how important that is, particularly during COVID. Telemedicine was really something that was being used in a very moderate fashion. When COVID hit, Bellin, for example, like quadrupled their telemedicine contacts in 1 month. Older persons had fear about going into the doctor's clinic and getting exposed to COVID. So they needed to do things at home, and it really helped reduce barriers like transportation, getting to the doctor's office. Many of the people that I am speaking to really are saying that this is really here to stay. People are not going to want telemedicine to go away because they can access a physician very easily and quickly, a nurse practitioner 24 hours a day. When you need it, you can chat, etc. So this is really something that is challenging all of our systems to adapt to the needs of older persons in a way that we weren't ready to do, but COVID accelerated for us, that we need to do more of. Next slide. Grief and loss. So this is something that funeral homes, I think, never anticipated was going to be something they were going to be dealing with. One, the amount of death and the boon in their business, quite unfortunately, but finding ways to help people deal with grief and loss at a time that they can't be together. One of the advantages is family members from all of the country were able to actually participate in a funeral. But we have a lot to learn about what is it like to have a virtual funeral and not actually be able to digest and work through the grief that you might have in person. Support groups have sprung up in a very serious way online and have been a great, again, silver lining to give people access to the support that they need, a really complex problem that's being solved through technology. We will say that there's a lot of delayed grief that's going to have to be dealt with once people can return being together. But it has changed the face of what funeral homes are like and what they do for a business. Next slide. So food delivery, access. This is a UW-Madison campus idea, which is hot on the scenes, and we are already entertaining these ideas in our community about having drones or small robots be able to be available to simply use a phone, make an order, and it's going to come down the street all on its own and find its way to your door. We've been doing some future planning here and have seen in Meals on Wheels program that we deliver that there's really some opportunities to reduce our reliance on volunteers and actually find some automated ways to get food to people. Next slide. The thing that's going to probably change the face of older adults' lives more than almost anything is going to be driverless cars. They're already there, but they're continuing to get smarter, faster, and less expensive. The minute that an older person is going to be able to plug in to a GPS the location they need to go and simply sit in a car and it will take them where they need to go and bring them home is going to change the face of what it means to live independently. It is often the biggest deal breaker for people being able to stay at home because they can't grocery shop, can't get to the doctor, they have to live on a bus line or have access to other public transportation, which is a humongous problem for older people. What you see on the right is the Tiger. It's actually adapted from a driverless car that can also go to a walking position. Can you even imagine what that would be like? Because the car can only get you to the street in front of your house. If that car can also morph into something that can actually take the steps, go through other kinds of terrain, imagine where this will take us. Next slide. So not everything is high tech, and I was impressed by hearing the several of the presentations today, but getting people access and knowing how to use technology is a true barrier, and we need to figure out that problem. Those things can exist, but if people can't use them, they're not going to be helpful to us. So I wanted to make sure I pointed out some of the low-tech innovations that have happened that really are also equally life-changing. What you see on the top is actually called hip pads. Now, we've kind of learned at the end of the day that they may not be super effective at stopping hip fractures, but hip fractures are a tremendous problem for older folks. The mortality rate of somebody who breaks a hip and goes into the hospital is 57%. So we want to stop falls and stop hip fractures. While maybe they're not as effective as we'd like, you can certainly do a character part on Downton Abbey after using your hip pads if you would like. But one of the really effective game changers has been the hippo. If you see this down there, older women in countries that folks need to carry water from large bodies of water back to their houses. Imagine carrying that on your head and what that would mean for your ability to stay at home or to stay hydrated, some life sustaining issues. The hippo is actually a big plastic drum that was a really smart low-tech innovation, much like the choppa. We need to chop vegetables. What can we do in a low-tech way that really can make that simpler and easier? Here we have where they took that 1-gallon pail that they could carry into a 75-gallon pail that can be pushed or rolled. An amazing aha moment that changes the face of people's ability to survive. Next slide. So last but not least, this is actually a new innovative idea. When we talk about the end of life, there's been a development of a robotic arm and machine that helps stay with people at the end of their life, that strokes their arms and actually has a voice that tells them, you're going to be okay, I'm here. The number of people who have had to die alone during COVID has been absolutely tragic. Not being able to have family members close or coming in, that this spurred an innovation like this. So we're going to see even more end of life technology changes. Next slide. So at the end, I just want to say, who are the innovators? And I always remind people that the person doing the innovation most often creates the best invention if they are the user, if they understand it. Much like many of you talked about today, it was spurred by something you had seen or done or experienced. You become an expert when it is your life. This is 91-year-old innovator Barbara Beskind. She is a retired occupational therapist who has created an incredible amount of adaptive aids as she began to experience age herself. And she became a brilliant innovator. She did say, though, do I keep this idea to myself until I can find a manufacturer, or do I reveal these things and give away the store? Well, I'm 91 now. I don't want to have time. I don't have time or money to wait around for the patents. So there becomes an ethical dilemma. If you discover something wonderful, are you solving a social program that makes the world a better place? Or are you doing it in order to capitalize on some financial benefits? Next slide. So I would just ask all of you in this short time, what do you see? What has it been that you've noticed the changes, the accelerations, and the opportunities with all of your great projects? Keep thinking big, keep dreaming big. There's so much on the horizon to do, and I'm thrilled to be a part of this today, and thank you for all your time.